Hello, consultants. It looks like you're ready to talk through some of the comments that you made in parking, hopefully.
Yep.
All right. And it looks like we still have a couple of people online, mostly just a few.
Is this open to the public session? I mean, I don't know. Is
We
it
could
intended to be?
we could reconvene and just meet back on here, or if you're comfortable having public involved, it wouldn't be open for public comment.
I guess we're the city's consultants, so whatever the city
right.
wishes.
Well, thank you both for some comments. I did just get them, as you know, but I was hoping to walk through a couple of the comments to see if everybody was in concurrence. Probably the first question is Derek had suggested making some of the dimensional standards slightly smaller. This is the current Boise code standards, if I remember correctly. And so instead of 10 feet as a standard requirement, dropping it down to 9, stalling, dropping it down a little bit, and then driveway width, dropping it down a little bit. And then the document that I'm looking at is the document with Brett's comment, because I think it incorporates both of your comments.
Yeah, I grabbed the one that Derek had commented and added my comments there. So.
Oh, perfect. I'm gonna get to that one then.
And one of my questions there too is the size of vehicles, particularly in this area, that a lot of people tend to drive, and the increasing size of vehicles, the trend towards increasing size.
You mean Idaho in general?
Yes, Idaho in general, and then a lot of vehicles are increasing in size, which they just are.
But should we make a code to accommodate that trend if that trend is in the wrong?
No, I don't know. It's a question to you both.
Right.
And
And maybe like to back up one step. And you may recall my gut reaction and tendency is a recommendation of repeal. So having just said that and put that out there, then this is the, like, should it be a code amendment rather than appeal? These are my comments for that.
Okay, I will make sure it's noted.
I think as far as dimensional standards here, it's a lot of times it's the 9-foot wide stalls tend to be in more jurisdictions than not adequate, where I think that definitely some thought needs to be given is the drive width. Once you start, I mean, do I think it needs to be 22 feet? No. Do I think anything, under, 20 feet is, if you've tried to navigate into a parking stall with a 20-foot drive aisle, double loaded type of a scenario, it's tight. And so, 20 foot is kind of the minimum that you're going to need for access for fire truck in a situation like that anyways. Maybe some thought there. I don't know where the 19 came from versus a 22, but I think it's in my mind, it's maybe what I'm trying to say, maybe a little bit less important of the stall size as it is maneuvering and access.
Yeah.
That's just me. I'd rather see it, taken out of the stall and giving a little bit more to the maneuvering and access to, so that's not tight, and then the stall's tight, and then as maybe Jenna was alluding to, the guy in the big Ford F-350, which I drive, is like
No
sticking
judgment.
way out, and you can't even get access, down there, because just it's reality. So anyways, just food for thought on.
And 20 may be the right number if that's the fire lane anyway, because then, a designer trying to grab all these different numbers, they just grab the same number.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it makes sense how things get cut down when you're basically diagonal parking. I mean, you're kind of one-way travel, it's a whole different deal once you start getting into those angled parking. But your 90-degree parking, I mean, chances are you're gonna have parking on both sides in a lot of those conditions if you can. So that's all I really had on the dimensional aspects anyways.
Right.
And I think part of the minimums, 9 feet wide or 8 feet wide or whatever, it doesn't preclude a developer from knowing that they have, 100% of their tenants are going to have trucks, and they make them all 10. It's just a minimum. Like,
No, exactly.
Draw how you want for your market. If your market is, all contractors with big trucks, then plan accordingly, right?
All right. So, got it. And then the next, I'm jumping clear to page 7, unless there's something between that you specifically want to highlight. And so there is a push from public comments to the half mile, to make things half mile instead of quarter mile. It looks like Brett thinks a half mile is too great. And I might note that in looking in walkability scores, walkability, their exact criteria is not disclosed, but they do provide higher numbers, higher ratings for a quarter mile, and Olive Garden City Code. And the comp plan has been based off of literature that indicates that a quarter mile is the target. So is there?
I guess just go ahead, Brett.
No, I was just going to say, I just think, the quarter mile seems to be already kind of established in code as kind of this distance. I saw here initially 300 feet. Wow, that's hardly anything. But, a half a mile, if you think about, a mile is 5,280 feet. A half mile is a good stretch to say, oh, this is my associated parking with my development. I just got to walk quite a few blocks to get to it.
I put it in the context of like reality and what happens, and half a mile is 10 minutes, right? And so you go to work at Zion's Bank, and this is an example, you don't want to pay for parking there, so you park down by Hurlis Brothers and you walk 12 minutes to get, you like it's a real distance that people walk to get from point A to point B. So I'm just looking at it in the context of like, cities grow, cities get developed, go to big city USA or big city anywhere in the world and park somewhere, and then go to where you're going. A half a mile, 10-minute walk is like, not uncommon throughout the world. So that's all where that came from. I'm not I'm not
Yeah, and
sure.
I think the key here is too, we're, in that particular instance, we're talking about for residential units. So
Yeah.
not necessarily
Yeah.
I'm parking and I'm walking 10 minutes to get to my place of business coming back. No, I'm parking, 10 or 12 minutes away and carrying my groceries and stuff to my house. And yeah, I
Right,
don't know.
right.
It's,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
little different.
So am I hearing maybe quarter mile to keep it?
That's what I believe in that instance. To me, a quarter mile makes sense for the residential dwelling units.
Right.
And exact example is what we heard earlier, right? It's residential units. It would be as if that cross parking agreement was a half a mile away instead of connected.
Mhm.
Yeah, or a quarter. Yeah, I'm not going to die on the half mile stake on the residential ones.
Am I hearing a half a mile though on commercial then?
I would just keep it. I would just keep it all a quarter.
Okay.
I mean, that's my thought instead of.
All right, and then we have a big point of discussion.
Okay,
To
which one's
cover,
that?
not to cover garage spaces, and then I'm seeing perhaps require one covered space or garage space for residential later on in the comments.
Yeah, I guess I could start with my thought on that is I don't know that it's in, and Derek even asked the question, does it need to be enclosed? And I guess my thought is, I think you could even get back to, for all these residential units, just requiring a covered stall for everybody. And then if you're beyond 2 bedrooms, you're into the 3-bedroom range, what have you, maybe add another parking, a requirement for another parking spot, but it doesn't necessarily need to be covered. But the reality of covered stalls in our, at least covered in our climate zone and what we deal with on a regular basis from the standpoint of weather conditions, and it just, to me, it's kind of a more responsible and more appropriate thing to have. Doesn't need to be enclosed. Let the market dictate whether garages are needed and that type of an enclosed element. But I think covered kind of goes with, okay, if you're going to have multifamily units, you can provide some cover and some carports, or maybe you want to do some in garages. If you're a single family home attached, which is basically townhomes, so you're a 5-plex or a 7-plex or what have you, you have the ability to provide an enclosed or just covered stall. Maybe you want to have carports in that scenario and cluster your parking, or it just brings about a lot more flexibility. And the whole instance where I only want to, facilitate just one stall, but I want to use my driveway for my other stall, or, you can do that now, and you can do it with a 3-bedroom, and you don't need to have a 2-car garage if you're feeling that your market is such that you're not after that group that's going to need this big old garage, but you want to give your clientele or your market segment one closed garage and have some more parking in the driveway. It can be facilitated. And maybe just reeling this back to saying, okay, per dwelling unit, you need 1 parking stall covered. Doesn't have to be enclosed. And then if it's if it's beyond 2 bedrooms, if you're a 3+, you require another parking. 1 more
open
stall.
Or wherever.
Wherever. It could be open. They could decide to put it in a garage and not have the driveway space because they don't have it on the site, whatever. But it really kind of, in my mind, reduces this down to what Derek, what you had initiated was why can't this be a more market driven aspect? And I think it pushes it towards that. While I think it's appropriate to say, let's provide one stall for a dwelling unit. I don't like the idea of 3 dwelling units sharing a parking stall because I only provided 0.3 or 0 or what. It's not reality. We don't have the public transportation to compensate for that on a large degree. We don't have subways. We don't have reliable bus routes or many bus routes to make it convenient. We just don't have some of the things that these larger cities that have higher densities and have 0 parking requirement. And we're just not in the same boat. And so, that's my feeling, is that I think we can totally reel this thing back and not dictate that garages are necessary. Let the market figure that out.
Well, what I like about it too, to use another recent example, is the, I forget the name of it, but the one that we looked at with garage door, all the way down this kind of central alley. Then they could say, well, let's have one in a garage, one in a carport, and it like opens up this pathway, and it's less like a canyon of garages, it opens that up. And then I would question too, in this, if then developers and designers would start to say, okay, here's your one covered with this unit in this 5-plex, and then over here is this open parking that may be reserved for unit A, unit B, unit C, but then that could begin to, make more compact development and bring some of the parking out into more open space. And it's not just this dense canyon of 2-car garage doors. So
And,
I think it has some opportunity.
Provide some more flexibility and getting away, maybe helping to nudge or push development in a way that we get some product that's less garage dominated. And that kind of a feeling, more pedestrian focused kind of facade treatments and the rest of that, more flexibility to do that, because you're not putting all these developments in this one box and saying that, everybody's got to have these enclosed garage. We got to see garage door on every single project because we're trying to accommodate garages.
Yes.
This brings up a question for me. Would you like on-site then to be considered within a subdivision or within a development, to almost encourage, instead of every lot within the subdivision having to have that on-site space, to say you can group those elsewhere or maybe help facilitate that?
Oh, I think that's part of the unique solution that we're kind of creating here. When you say covered, is that you give an opportunity for some a little bit more remote, maybe clustering remote parking in these developments, and not providing more pedestrian access in and around the buildings and the rest of that, instead of having to provide this vehicular pathways everywhere to every single building or aspect, because you're trying to accommodate parking at that unit. So maybe if I'm understanding what you're saying, Jenah, is, in a larger development, you may have parking for a number of units on more of a common lot scenario or something of that nature, where it's really not on their individual townhome lot. And I think that's what I'm thinking that this opens the door to, is more kind of creative solutions on how you provide your covered parking stall, and then some extra is you can kind of detach it from the individual dwelling units if you have the opportunity to do that.
All right. Sounds good. Is the tiered table what you envisioned? The,
Yeah, it is. And I had that one comment there, but maybe you kind of, I don't know if you clarified that elsewhere, but it just needs to be clear that, hey, not every condition is actually lined out or noted here. And you're going to have kind of like uses or like types of facilities that kind of got to fall into a category, and somebody's got to make the decision of, okay, yeah, that's the appropriate category in the high, medium, or low, where it falls, and it should probably just land back on planning to make that determination.
yeah, I think it's a very necessary comment as well, but if it's not in there, I'll figure out how to get it in there.
Yeah, maybe it just could be an asterisk under the uses headline there, and down to a little footer that says not intended to be all inclusive.
Okay. And then at the last time that we discussed, the intent would be to require some, but not, make a very minimum number. For the high intensity, 1 per 500 gross square feet, medium intensity, 1 per 1,000. And
again, I think that those are, I would say, erring or kind of focus more down on the low side, but the idea was to try and create these just basic minimums, and again, let then the applicant come back and say, wow, yeah, for what I'm anticipating for the number of users or patrons that we're going to have for this 1 per 500, that's not enough parking for me. And so, I've got enough space here. I'm going to go ahead and add more parking because I think I'll use it. And then there's the users that say, well, gosh, I'm in walking distance from all these homes and the rest of this. And so for my little neighborhood restaurant, this is easily doable, and it's not, overkilling me for my small piece of property. So I think in my mind, it's a good balance for what you have here.
all right, good.
Derek, what do you think? It's a good.
Yep, I agree. And I think the intention of the numbers, like you said, is to make just like put the bottom bar really low, right? So that it's not drastically underparked if it's just to code.
Right, thank you. And then I think it's I'm clear to page 17, I think, with the bicycle parking. And it looks like that's something we need to have a discussion on. The 1 space per unit is getting closer to the proposed Boise for residential, but then we hadn't touched non-residential at 1 per 20. And then Brett had made the comment, if we're decreasing vehicular parking, should we be increasing bicycle parking?
Yeah, and just to elaborate on that comment, I mean, bicycle parking doesn't take a whole lot of space. I mean, whether you put in for 1 stall or 1 bike or 3 bikes, I mean, the rack is going to be 3 or 5. I mean, to me, if you're going to kind of look at moving towards, hey, we're embracing these, alternative transportation, alternative ways to meet parking requirements and all the rest of this, bikes seem like low hanging fruit to me to say, hey, let's have more bike parking. We're talking about doing these other things in the code to I don't know, embrace the idea that people are walking and biking more, and the closer you are to different locations, in the city. it makes more sense to have more bike parking and maybe require that there is a higher level of bike parking instead of what is currently here in this table, 1 per 20 vehicles. We're pretty much saying that, I mean, I don't know what kind of a business is going to have 20 vehicles at our current minimum parking requirements. That's going to be an Albertsons complex or something. I mean, I just don't see at 1 per 500. So I think maybe some thought about upping what our bicycle parking is might be to kind of more or less reflect our reduction in parking.
Okay.
Agreed. And then I don't know where it addresses, but it's in the back of my mind about I think there's comments coming up about that the bike parking is the bike parking. I'm going to the developer downtown in downtown Boise that said, oh yeah, our bike parking is in each individual's apartment. That's the dedicated bike parking. And they somehow skirted around actually providing covered bike parking in a development by saying, yeah, they just put their bikes in their apartments and that's private and protected and covered use. So having something where it talks about bike parking, that it's a dedicated, public, accessible, protected use is important.
Yep, agreed. And I had that once, I think it's on that same page where the bicycle parking is here. I think we kind of talk about this tandem parking. And my comment there, I think really tandem parking is a response to, hey, you need 2 parking spots in a garage and boy, I just don't have the space. I think when you go to, hey, one parking covered per unit, tandem parking probably doesn't even come into play anymore.
Well, if I park 1 car in a garage and then I need 22 feet of backup space, and that's kind of on my own property still, that's tandem. That's 2 spots in tandem, right? So I can have a garage covered parking, then I can have a parking spot in the backup space in essence. And then I've got 2 parking spots for a 3-bedroom unit.
Yeah, I guess I don't even really. Is there a necessity to even address tandem parking or not?
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying why even define it and talk about it, because a spot is a spot.
I mean, if they got one in the garage and they got one in the driveway, I mean, that's tandem parking all day long. And it's been, I mean, the fact that we're letting them put a required parking spot in the driveway, I don't know that it's necessary to address it or say that it, only be allowed in certain situations. I mean, again, it's a market driven thing.
Yeah. It could be maybe a function of, if we have all this kind of unbundled and unattached parking and we start counting, okay, that's unit A's covered spot, and then tandem behind it is unit B's extra spot, that gets complicated. And then you want all A, B, C, D, E, F, G, where it says, no negative impacts and no conflicts and all that sort of stuff.
So you're saying maybe take out that it doesn't count as one of your required, or leave it then, to Derek's point, altogether.
I don't know. Brett was going towards eliminating it all, and I could be talked into that and see what happens. Like what's going to happen if you eliminate it entirely is developers are going to say, yeah, A is in front of B and that's on them. Right.
I guess if you, what I think is problematic is if you provide tandem parking, but you got different, you got the stall in front belonging to, is the required cover stall for unit A, and the stall in back behind it is the required cover stall for unit B. That's where it's a huge conflict. Now, if it's two tandem parking stalls that is for one unit or what have you, and they got to facilitate, moving their car so they can pull their other car out, I don't think it's an issue for anybody. So, maybe it just gets shortened up to deal with that, tandem parking can't be used, unattended tandem parking that's not through a valet or what have you, can't be used for facilitating required parking for different units. And I think that just clears it up. If it's for the same unit, it can happen all day long anywhere. It doesn't affect anybody else except for that one person or the one dwelling unit, which is then going to be whether somebody feels like they want to buy that or rent that unit based on that parking configuration.
Yeah, it's keeping the first part of the definition and then rewording B. Tandem parking will not create conflicts for different users or, unassociated users or whatever the terminology would be for that.
I just think it can be simplified.
Okay. Great. And then we can ask what to do with the Searle Mitchell grandfather rights. So legal, and add a definition for equivalent parking and take off facilities.
Oh, got it. Yep.
So.
And I think I finally understood your C number 4, where you said better wording. I think I understood it to mean as, you're talking about this part being reduced. Yeah, I got it. So it makes sense after you put it in a specific application.
Yeah, I'll keep looking for better wording for that because it's not easy to understand. And then the table, the fun table. So is there a desire to combine the requirements and the criteria? If so, I think we can do that. Requirements and or criteria.
I think that probably, in my mind, trying to make it a little less complicated and kind of straightforward as possible.
All right. And then on a whole, the public comments that were received were make it easier to achieve, I guess. So increase the percentages and decrease whatever the criteria is. So that's a lot of the comments throughout that.
Well,
or discounts for less coupons.
What's that?
More discounts for less coupons.
Yes, yes.
Well, I think we've in what we've done with the overall minimum parking requirement, we've already provided a bunch of coupons.
There are a lot of coupons in that.
So it's kind of like, God, if you really need extra reduction beyond the low bar that we've set, I mean, I don't know that it's a problem that these percentages are where you have them or necessarily need to be a lot higher, because they're starting a lot lower to begin with. And so a lot of these may be, unless it's a really big development or something like that, it might be negligible to where they say, well, gosh, we don't even need to do that because of the minimum required parking that we already have.
Yeah. And I think some of them we should look at just because, and I don't know which one specifically, it's a long chart, but some of them were like, you did quite a lot to get like 1/6% of a car, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
so some of them you had to add something to one side of the tree or the other to make it worth even considering, because we don't want, a designer to spend a half a day trying to figure out how to meet a criteria. And at the end of the day, they get, 0.47 of a car and it doesn't even count.
I would agree. I mean, if it's something that gives that negligible of a return, then we should just wipe it off and it shouldn't even be
Okay.
on the list.
Same.
And I don't know, which ones are you thinking were kind of like that, maybe? Derek. Trying to look here.
Well, I think the storage one is I'd eliminate the storage one just because it might promote the wrong thing.
Okay, and then same question for the really difficult ones to administer, like the mobility programs.
I think those ones are just, if they're gonna be a nightmare to try and administer that and keep up on it and verify that then it probably shouldn't be on there.
The transit incentives and shuttle services, and I think shuttle services for sure. It's just like, that's a long way out in Garden Cities, let alone Boise's future.
And quite honestly, I'd let somebody come to the table that really wants to implement something like that and say, hey, look, we've got a different, unique idea that's not in your table here. And, we'd like, to make a proposal that, it gets looked at as a reduction in this amount of part. Great, fine. If it's not in the table here, but it's got some validity, I think you can, it can still be brought forth for consideration. Because you're not going to think about all the potential, just like the shared EV on the one project, here more recently. Having that kind of stuff when we hadn't had somebody approach that concept on a project, and so it was kind of unique, and make the case.
Yeah. And how do you do that without getting an application of a unique idea that's really not unique? It's just trying to move the needle enough to get 3 less parking spots. How do you word that to be like, you have to be super creative and this has to be ingenious and be of benefit to the city, not just trying to.
Not subjective at all.
Right, exactly.
And then like the electronic charging stations, do we want to consider that as a mandatory instead of an incentive? There are certain things with potential directions.
I think
sure.
that, I think that the city itself probably needs to start thinking about that. A lot of jurisdictions are mandating so many EV charging stations per number of stalls, and when you're reducing the required amount of stalls, how does that factor in? And there's definitely ones that are just mandating that you put in the facilities for it, meaning the conduit, the panel size, and all the rest of that, and maybe not even requiring that they actually install it this time, but the new construction is provisioned such that it's easy to plop an EV charging station down and pull your conduit, and the service is already sized for it. But even with that, there's solar EV charging solutions too, where they put solar panels on the cover of the stall, and you have solar charging for them. So there's a lot of different solutions, but I think just getting in front of it and thinking what the city wants to do, as far as you want to have some kind of requirement and get it out there, because the market is already going to drive it that way to a certain extent.
And then we heard from Mr. Talbot tonight, and he's also mentioned it to me. He thinks the parking agreement should go away altogether because he doesn't think people will encumber their property, it doesn't make sense, but do we want to leave it in?
What page
You
you
know,
on?
I was gonna say, I think you could probably still leave it in. Again, some of the things that we're talking about here with the reduced quantities of required parking and such are gonna make it that maybe, that's not necessary in most cases for people to look elsewhere. But if you do have a developer that has multiple parcels and wants to kind of facilitate his development on multiple locations with these cross parking agreements and the rest of that, I don't see that there's any harm in leaving it in there.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it's a good tool, and I always just put it in the context of something that I know and understand. And Barrigas Mexican has a parking lot across the street that's signed and striped for their customers. And if that evolved from a change of use, and Barrigas couldn't exist without that lot and a cross parking agreement, then the city would be worse off, right? So I think that there's times when that's a good tool.
This is the whole thing with the ADA parking and proximity and the rest of that. And I just did I was trying to see if there's something in the guidelines that really speak to that. I would hate to set something up here and codify something that is in conflict with what is acceptable from, just the whole idea with an accessible parking spot to an accessible route is really not having them remote and wheeling down the sidewalk or what have you to get to this and going a quarter mile. That's just not, no. The whole idea with accessible parking stalls is that they get to be front and center. And so what does that constitute when I think we've got probably most businesses are going to have at least one stall from the standpoint of that. And so then, okay, maybe they're one required parking stall, it's an accessible stall. I just think that I would err on the side of caution with putting something in there that you're not tying like we did with all the rest of the ADA requirements and tying that to federal requirements and adopted ADA standards.
and I do need to look at that more. It's something that's recently come up where
I couldn't find it just a real quick glance, but I didn't spend a bunch of time on it either. I figured that we would probably be talking about it, so I just put my.
Yeah, it's like you said though. It's like those spots have to be the closest to the door, and if that's the case, that just kind of eliminates them from being down the street.
Okay. On the mixed use. Page 28, the shared parking. To take out the eating establishments, is that?
I guess that's a tough one. I can go both ways on that because you got a lot of you do have eating establishments that might be like a breakfast only kind of thing. And so then could it have kind of this shared use with some other functions that operate more in the latter part of the day, or vice versa? They're only doing lunch and dinners. And so, I don't know. I guess I don't know that you need to really stipulate if it looks like if a developer comes in there and the type of uses that they've got, it makes sense that they're going to have differing hours of use then.
Okay, so take out the whole percentage based on use to use. and maybe say
Yeah, I just think that
usage hours or
it's
something.
it's going to, I think just by the contemplated uses are going to validate whether there's going to really be legitimately kind of different times of occupying those different uses, and it works or it doesn't. I mean, just try to think of all the different scenarios and put something in here that covers it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to put a credit on that, not knowing. Because it could be.
Yeah, I mean, it really is depending on kind of what they're proposing. And so how do you quantify how much of a reduction can you get from it? I don't know. Maybe you do an up to X percentage. I don't know. But then that leaves it a little bit more, I guess, subjective on how you get there. And is it 10% or 12% of the 30 up to 30? I mean, how do you? We probably don't want to get in that position where it's not so specific and it's too much gray.
Okay, now I have a harder one.
Okay, which one's that?
Live work, Derek's comment that non-residential spaces less than 500 do not contribute to parking calculations. So would that open the door for 499 spaces on I mean, like gross exaggeration, but maybe just straight up and no parking associated.
But they're tied to live. So we've demonstrated that the primary residence and the full-time employment are on site for each individual, right? So we've kind of tied the work to the live, and that's me living upstairs from my office,
Okay,
right? Isn't that what the documentation demonstrating primary residency? That's what that's saying, right? Which makes sense. I live upstairs, I work downstairs, or I go downstairs to my, showroom. I don't need a parking spot for, going down my stairs.
Yeah, I mean, 500 square feet is not a whole lot of square footage.
Right.
So
Okay.
I don't think somebody's going to be squeaking in necessarily. I mean, it's either you are or you aren't.
And so, Jenna, to answer your question in a different way, a 500 unit development with 499 square foot commercial units for those 500 living units would not require any additional parking other than the 500 for the living units.
okay. But they'd still need
But-
the,
But 499 square foot commercial units sitting alone on their own site would require, 499 times 500 divided by 500.
Yeah.
right. And then on the shared parking surplus where, after X number of units providing the guest parking, then you reduce that, so you don't have a ton of empty guest parking spaces. And then Derek's comment, just to make that count smaller. So I'm assuming like the 1 per 10. Just straight across the board for like multifamily.
Oh, let's see.
So it's the next
Go.
one. That work.
I'm going back up to our chart because our chart says
I didn't touch it from current code, so it's still at the 1 per 2.
multifamily residential. Oh, wait, that's bike.
And then this one. After 10 units, which would be 5 spaces, then reduce that.
And that's what I'm gonna jump in. So I went back up to that chart 8.4D2. You had 0.5 for every 2 dwelling units, you had 0.5. And I just changed that to 0.1. So that then goes down to my comment where we are on page 29 is like just reduce the number of guests altogether.
So that would get, you'd have, then at that ratio at 5 units, that's when you would trigger your first guest parking space.
Yeah. And then you don't need a surplus reduction. Because I guess I don't understand in principle how a 300 unit development has less guests than a 30 unit development.
Well, I think the idea is the first few guests. So if you have 5 residents, they'd still need guest parking, at least probably 2 guest parking. Or whatever it may be. And then as you go up from there, they're not all gonna have guests at the same time. So you get to reuse that guest space by more people.
Now.
That's just confusing
So-
math, I think, is why I'm trying to get rid of it.
Well, but if you get down to, if you were talking about what you said is 0.1, then you need 10 units to have 1 stall for guests.
Well, you get to a half a car at 5 units and then that rounds up to 1.
Oh, okay, I got you.
So you'd have 1 at 5, 1 up to 10.
You have
2 for
1
20.
at 5 and you wouldn't have 2 until you.
Till 15.
That's a little, that might be a little on the thin side, seeing as how we've,
Okay,
again,
0.2 and it's done.
Well, it has been suggested, I think, it was Erstad that submitted a letter asking the 1 per 10. So, and others, I mean, there are tons, there's over 200 comments on this right now, but the 1 per 10's something I've heard or seen a couple of times, but I would suggest the first few units need a guest space before you can start having that reduction.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe there is a sliding scale that goes with, okay, X number of units and then it drops down to 0.1. I mean,
And just move it out of the reduction.
and then, yeah, but instead of having this in the shared parking residential surplus, having this whole component here, just address it on the other side in the residential parking, where you have just that one little line item that says it's like 0.5 or whatever. Yeah. So you can kind of just expand that a little bit and say, okay, for developments up to this many units, here you are, you're 0.2, and then beyond that, you're 0.1 or something of that nature. And then I think you're good. You're done.
Okay. Right. And then Derek, I apologize. I missed that you had suggested, made suggestions on the ratios in the table. I was seeing that as formatting, so I'll look at that again. Affordable housing, do you both agree in really increasing that to like 125 and 150% of the parking needs?
I think it's just like, it's gotta be an actual incentive if that's what you're going for, right? And when has housing been built even less than 80% AMI? Like with, $100,000 bill tax breaks is when it gets done, not with parking. So you're adding like a little, you're adding a little grain of sand to something that's already kind of unattainable for most developers. So it's got to be, at least a small pebble that'll make a ripple in the water.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, additional incentives for
And
that.
what does that,
It's going to happen because it's.
and what does it really mean to have 125% reduction? Like if required to have 10 spots, now you have 2.5 extra spots without doing anything. And then it's like a carbon credit, you sell it on the open market. I have no idea how that works, but like the incentive has to be there, and maybe this isn't the right tool, but I think it has to be a dramatic number if the Garden City's goal is to provide an incentive for that.
Okay.
And is having a affordable housing parking credit reduction only in your parking code the right way to do it? I mean, has Garden City addressed it anywhere else with an incentive for?
I think
affordable housing.
common code, hopefully,
Yeah.
But I think this would be a start where there's an incentive there. And then on the existing structure, the significant remodeling of the structure and site can occur in conjunction with a new use. I was trying to get it, if you're demolishing half the site, can you still claim the reductions by being an existing structure? Probably not, because you're completely altering the site.
Yeah, I think that existing structure goes into the thing that I think I kind of mentioned the last time around, and incentives for adaptive reuse of the existing structures. So if you're not leaving much there, just a portion of the foundation, why would you get credit for existing structure? So.
And I can delete that significant remodeling out, but that was the intent of what that was trying to say.
What's this? Oh, the transit pass.
And then, so on the transit pass, I have a meeting with BRT to discuss. They're really interested in this to see if Garden City can become a pilot program. The problem with how it's set up right now is it doesn't do a lot for the transit. If somebody comes in and does a whole lot of transit passes, because I think the price goes down to something ridiculous like $6 a pass instead of that whatever they charge, the $385 per pass. And so they would have to discontinue that in these situations.
They just want a certain dollar amount per pass to make it feasible.
Yeah, for it to be effective, we would need money to be going towards their operation versus it's just a whole lot of passes at one spot. And then the existing walkability, I'm on page 37, was an attempt to coming up with the walk score that we discussed last time. And so I did look at like the walk scores. And what gets you higher walk score and just like the generic walk score. And it is distilled into, well, it would need to be walkable sidewalk. And if they're dense development, that increases the walk score. If it's a quarter mile, it's a better walk score than say a half mile, but it does differentiate. And then there's different services that you have to hit to start getting higher on the walk score. And so that's roughly trying to distill that.
Yeah, I think if it's pretty straightforward and you're checking the boxes, I got one of these and this in this range and so on and so forth. That equates to this score and this amount of reduction. I think that's good. And then the more that area gets developed and there's more stuff in the closer proximity, it even gets better.
Right. And then I think I understand the other comments. I doubt, I mean, we can try, but with the timing of this, I think that getting an actual parking benefit district established might be a heavy lift, not that it couldn't come right on the tail.
You mean putting the boundary in place? Putting a boundary in place?
Boundary in the resolution. Mhm.
Yep.
But I think we all know right where one might go.
That, yeah, and then it's not like, you know, you're doing this, the public is aware, the public that wants to know is aware of what's going on with this actual rewrite about parking. So then it's not this like separated event, like, hey, we didn't even know you guys were talking about this. You know, it just kind of comes on the heels of it, and it's not a whole nother gear up of public interest about parking dialogue. And then as a whole too, like big development needs 100 spots. Okay, we got transit passes, 20% reduction. Now I know only need 80. Okay, I'm doing this bike thing minus 5 spots. Now I only need 75. This is it, like at what point, or can a potential boardwalk apartments get to 0 through reductions? Or is there some line at the top that says, you know, maximum parking reductions can't exceed 75% of required reductions? I mean, in the case of affordable housing, they can go into the other direction theoretically, but
That's
like,
a good question. That was something I've been hoping to actually get feedback from you on. There are some that I think obviously you could do 100%, you know, if you have your parking provided in another facility. But then others, if you do the, hey, people have passes, I have motorcycle and bicycle parking, you know, and those reductions, can you get to 100%? Is that something, or should it be capped?
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, they all have a benefit side for the credit side. It's not just like you can grab a credit for doing nothing. So,
Well, and yeah, I think that for sure is something about the changes here, is that there is no reason to have any kind of parking reduction without validating it by something on here.
yeah,
Not just that we don't have enough space.
yeah.
But is there can you get to 0 Or is there a threshold that's somewhere down there? I don't know. And how do you pick what that is? You know?
Right. Or
Even if
or
they
the-
got to zero, would the developer want
Right.
to be at zero because
Right.
zero is not reality maybe for whatever
Yeah.
they're doing.
and that then becomes kind of, it kind of becomes an option to go wherever you want to go. If your market says, I do have a development where everyone is biking and we have one shared car and we literally only need one parking spot for that one shared car. If that is truly the intent and that will truly work for that developer, then they can get there through this chart with reductions, right? So it becomes a market-driven, fluid, a la carte reduction menu.
And it puts the onus back on the developer to establish
What they
kind
want.
of almost like without without any criteria to bring to the table what they want, because you're setting the criteria so low and you're giving all these opportunities to reel it back. But there is some criteria there. It's not, we have no parking criteria whatsoever. And now,
Right.
come to us with what you want and we'll kind of try to review it based on no criteria. At least we're looking at the proposal based on something that's established.
And it's
Which,
objective,
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
Do you have this? -3%. Do you have that? -20%.
So at that point, can they get to zero? Sure, why not? Are they going to implement zero if they can get to zero? Well, they can.
Right.
But I don't know if they
Right.
will.
And I think where we see, Casino Beach as an example, it's like they do have parking, it provides it on site, and there was 3 extras. It's like, how do we make this program work without 3 spots? And then they pick a reduction, they use that reduction, they implement that reduction, and then they're okay with 3 spots. Casino Beach wouldn't have, if this was the code for Casino Beach, they wouldn't have come to us with the aim of 0, right? They're going to
Yeah.
come to us with the aim of what they did minus the 3 spots that they had difficulty with.
So I guess the long and the short of it is, I don't know that you need to put some kind of threshold that you can't go below this.
Okay. Well, and then I have another question, since they are getting a lot of coupons. And the reduction is kind of to provide almost either operational in many instances, or capital for future improvements. Will the city end up being able to kind of shift and help fund that transit and help fund those additional improvements if there are as many coupons? So are the coupons at the right? We'll stop with the coupons, but is the parking at the right ratio, or
What I'm missing the direction.
So the reductions, the alternatives, if the parking's already low enough that, if you have 1 parking per 2,000 and you have an existing structure. So I'm kind of looking at some of the alternatives as almost like an impact fee. And so you affect change through the reduction. And so by purchasing the passes or whatnot, but would they even be going to these reductions? With the table set out, where the table is the 5, whatever, I don't even remember what it's set out. Like
With
500.
the low original threshold.
Mhm,
Yeah.
The high parking needs being at 1 per 500, the medium at 1 per 1,000.
Mhm.
low at 1 per 2,000.
Well, I think, you know, at the end of the day, what Brett just brought up is the designers and developers and architects are gonna make a determination on how much parking they need, and then they're gonna see if that meets code,
Yeah.
you know, and if they're like, yep, it meets code. Or if code says, oh, you need 18 less, but they think they need 18, they're gonna put in what they need.
Okay.
But if the city's intention is to make the required parking so high that developers are pushing into these, you know, if the intent is to push them into alternatives to, you know, trigger parking benefit districts or trigger more ridership, then that's maybe a different discussion. Or maybe that's this discussion, but we discuss it.
I think they're two separate discussions. One is, are projects being adequately parked? And how to provide code that or directs people to adequately park their uses. And then I think that a second discussion is, how does the city create systems that allow the switch from the auto-centric to more of the transit, walkable, bikeable, all of that, because you have to install the sidewalks and then have usable transit. So it's a separate conversation, but are they tied together?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the different mechanisms really that you could contemplate for
Yeah,
implementing.
and
to
it
do
gets,
that.
and it gets into, you know, okay, you need 100 parking spots for a 5-plex, but you can reduce that down to 6 if you pave an extra 50 foot of sidewalk somewhere in the city. You know what I mean? It's like at some point the leverage becomes extortion, right?
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's not the intention.
No, and then Hannah and I had the conversation too, where a single family home parking stall is far less than like the parking stalls we were discussing today are $30,000 a piece. And so there's a big range of what the true trade-off would be. You'd almost have to go by parking type, and how would you balance that too, like the exact trade-off.
Or you just do something across the board where it's like an impact fee that everybody pays based on
Yep.
the criteria of, okay, based on this is how many stalls you're required. Well, there's a small impact fee that goes to the city to help facilitate, and it doesn't matter if you reduce your parking down to 0 because you paid into the bucket that helps to provide these other alternatives that benefits everybody. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's something like that.
Yeah.
$100 per parking stall for the next 10 years, and we could pave every unpaved sidewalk.
I mean, it definitely would. It definitely benefits everybody to provide those improvements for walkability around town, and you know, instead of just necessarily waiting till somebody develops in that particular spot to kind of complete that walkability on that run, you know, it gives an opportunity to go in and do those kind of things if there's some means for it.
All right. Well, Do you have any other comments for me to incorporate?
I don't, I think it was a good, second kind of run through.
And then back to the end of the last meeting, and I know it was interesting and noteworthy, but I can't remember which one it was that city council heard since we
Oh,
last met, that they did something different than we had in our minds. Or maybe I had in my mind, I can't remember.
it was the coffee subdivision.
Oh, yeah, what happened over there?
They.
Oh, yeah, the one out
Did
by HP.
They did change some things. They added a new floor plan. And then they addressed the side units. And then on the open space, there was a lot of discussion about like the way that the property kind of juts in and out. And gosh, what else did they do?
That was what developers changed between our hearing and when they went to council.
Yes, at
Yeah.
council. And so city council did approve it. And they suggested that the back area behind the Thurman Mill be utilized more like a park, like bridge over it to utilize that area better and better connect to the best of their capability because of the property lines are odd. And then, gosh, do you remember all of the conditions?
I think the one thing that I remember from it too, that I was like, okay, was the street front view, the variety of architecture that Brett and I did not see in the one continuous line of townhomes was not important to the city, and they didn't feel like that was that was interpreted that way in code, or they couldn't support that the way that it was written in code.
I'll have to review that again. What I had thought the applicant had indicated on their revised materials is they did undulate that a little bit more. But I don't know that for fact because those materials came in at the meeting, at the hearing. And so it sounds like you watched the city council, maybe.
Yeah, I listened to it. Yeah.
But I had understood the applicant to say they had addressed that. But I could be wrong. Because it is hard when somebody presents at the meeting. Their changes only a slide. So.
Okay,
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you. I very much appreciate all
And
of.
what's next step with parking?
Hopefully I'll be able to get this in front of you one last time before it goes through the hearings. And then, oh, I should definitely be able to because it's a work session in December with P&Z. And so P&Z will make their recommendation in January and city council will review it in February.
And
Okay.
then on the 19th of this month, we have a regular hearing with agenda items. And then do we have consultation items after that?
There is a consultation, the 19th, I thought that was, isn't the cell tower a consultation? Oh, yeah. And then there's a pre-app. Is that per, or is that in January? No, it's the 19th. It's not pre-app. Okay, so both. Yeah.
A formal and a consultation?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably far enough away you can't see me nodding.
I just needed to get my suit pressed if it was formal again.
And it's formal again. So it's the application off of State Street that's back behind existing buildings. You've seen it before. The KM building. And then I saw.
Oh, got it. Yep, the bunch of units with island parking.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay.
Very well. We'll see you then.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
Have a good couple of weeks.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye.